Get Back to Me there. That is Lady Antebellum with a beautiful song, Get Back to Me. Of course, setting the tone for conversation here just to light up the day early in the morning, the 25th of September 2018. Good morning, wakey wakey, you bang on time for AM Live. And of course, today it is Tuesday. You know, every Tuesday we have People in Politics coming your way, where we interrogate the politics of the week that has been. Now, the appointment made by President Uhuru Kenyatta to various parastatals on Friday have shown the spotlight on the reforms he initiated when he assumed office in 2013. Had President Uhuru Kenyatta stuck to the timelines he gave for the merger of state agencies, the architecture of the management and service delivery will have been radically different. But almost 5 years down the line, the envisaged merger is still being discussed in futuristic terms, when in fact it will have been completed within the 3 months set by President Kenyatta in October 2013, after the Presidential Task Force on Parastatal Reforms submitted its report. When he received the report, President Kenyatta said, quote-unquote, "The sector will be rationalized to remove overlaps, duplication, and redundancies, thereby trimming the current number of state corporations from 262 to 187, as recommended by the task force." The task force recommended merging of several parastatals to save taxpayers' money and increase efficiency. The report is yet to be fully implemented, but the president went full steam ahead and also appointed some chairmen to these particular parastatals. So, does it make any discernible difference when we have this particular report? We have also the appointment of the new chairman. Is the president speaking from both sides of the mouth? We take a keener look on that, on how parastatal reforms, of course, can also help in the austerity measures that we're talking about here in the country, where we're saddled with so much responsibility as taxpayers. But before we drill deeper, we have the dailies for you, and this is what you're waking up to. Just to clue you up, this is what is on the Daily Nation today. A day in hell for Sharon's mother is what is headlining the front page of the Daily Nation today. Governor Obado charged with murder of his pregnant girlfriend, a university student. Yesterday, Mrs. Otieno lived through every mom's nightmare, coming face to face with the man the state accuses of viciously ending the precious life of a 26-year-old daughter. This story is on page 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation today, and you can see a related picture there. Mr. Douglas Otieno, father of slain university student Sharon Otieno, wipes tears off his wife Melida Auma at Milimani Law Courts in Nairobi yesterday. Migori County, Governor Okoth Obado denied murdering the woman he admitted was his girlfriend. She was 7 months pregnant with his child when she was abducted and killed. And of course, this is a story that we'll be doggedly following for you today also, where he will be appearing before the courts in the afternoon. So our cameras also will be trained on that developing story. But this is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation today. But still on the front page of the Daily Nation as well, KRA KEBS officials face graft charges. More than 10 employees of Kenya Ports Authority, the Revenue Authority, and the Kenya Bureau of Standards were yesterday charged with allowing importation of substandard goods. The accused, who included senior officials, were arrested in Mombasa on accusations of allowing entry into the country expired rice, substandard potassium nitrate fertilizer, adult diapers, and tire tubes. You have the story tucked away on page 6 of the Daily Nation this morning. Abducted woman was not pregnant. This is what detectives are claiming. Mombasa criminal investigation boss Jacob Kanake yesterday said Miss Saida Abde Rahman, a 20-year-old woman who claimed she had been forced to abort by her abductors, was not pregnant at all. Miss Abdeharam and her family had claimed she was 8 months pregnant when she was kidnapped by 6 women last week and escorted to Nairobi. This story continues on page 8 of the Daily Nation today. "You betrayed my daughter," Sharon's mother tells Obado. She says Miss Otieno loved the governor a lot and did not deserve brutal death. This is a story that you can follow also on page 2 of the Daily Nation, which is headlining the front page of the front page of the Daily Nation today. There by Ruth Mbula inside the Daily Nation today. The Standard is up next, and this is what you're waking up to. Obado starts fight to avoid the hangman. This is what is a splash today. And it says in the doc, Migori governor will face off with a prosecution battling to fix him on the murder charge that, if successful, could put him on death row or hand him a long jail term. This story continues on page 6 and 7 of the Standard this morning. And you have the faces here on the front page of the Standard as well that are involved in this particular case. Beginning there with Nuruddin Haji, the Director of Public Prosecutions, will be at the center of the case against Obado over the murder of Sharon. Justice J.C. Lesit was staff in handling the case, dismissed prosecution's request to be given until Wednesday to respond to bail application, and also rejected Obado's request to be detained at Gigiri Police Station. Jacob Ondari, the Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions and Head of County Affairs and Regulatory Prosecutions, will lead the prosecution team in the case against Obado. Also, Melinda Auma, or this is Melida Auma, Sharon's mother, broke down and was comforted, I should say, by her husband and a handful of relatives who accompanied her to court. Cliff Umbeta has stuck with Obado from the first day he was implicated in Sharon's murder and is considered among his peers as a smart lawyer who understands the criminal justice system. Also, Helen Obado, her name was used by Governor Obado to make his case for bail, but unlike when she appeared with him at a press conference a few days ago, she was not at her husband's side when he appeared in court yesterday. This is on the front page of the Standard today. Also, tea farmers to get lower bonuses. You have all the details on page 10. It's all about the harvest. Details from directors, farmers affiliated to KTDA show payout expected next month will reduce as much as 10 shillings per kilo compared to last year. A quick look now at the Star. Obado's proxies got 2.5 billion shillings in tender scams. This is what it is on the front page of the Star this morning. Suspicious deals. Jared Kwaga was awarded contracts worth 1.6 billion shillings. EACC obtained orders to freeze freeze 6 banks' accounts and preserve 37 parcels of land. And you can see also a related picture there. Governor charged with the murder remanded. You can follow this story on page 4 and 5 of the Star. Chebukati fires Chiloba, cites gross misconduct. IBC yesterday formally sacked CEO Ezra Chiloba, who has been suspended since April. Chiloba was indicted by the Commission's internal audit report, which revealed taxpayers could have lost millions in flawed procurement and services for the general election. That story continues on page 2 of the Star this morning. Also, why former REA boss Nganga is in trouble. An internal audit by the Rural Electrification Authority Board has exposed blatant abuse of office and manipulation of tenders, putting former CEO Nganga Munyu in the spotlight. Munyu was kicked out by the board and is now being pursued by the anti-graft agency. That story continues on page 7 of the Star. Also, Senate grills KRA cabs over rotting maize in silos. A Senate committee has quizzed Malaba border agencies over the entry of 8 billion shillings maize that is now rotting in silos across the country. Yes, and it also grilled cabs, KRA and KEFIS officials. This story, you can follow it on page 8 of the Star this morning. The People Daily is up next, and this is what it's holding for us. Beg your pardon. We'll try and lift it up for you. There you go. Raila says, prepare for referendum. Full circle. He says it is part of the handshake deal with President Uhuru to fix country's problems. And this story continues on page 2 of the People Daily. Of course, we had the president speaking otherwise about the referendum. So we wonder if truly this is part of a handshake, but we'll thrash out that particular matter with our panelists much later. Also, harsh reality dawns on Obado. Things fall apart. Accustomed to the fine things, Governor carted to remand in prison bus to humble fare for food. Also, amid hoi polloi seasoned criminals. You can follow that story on page 4 and 5 of the People Daily this morning. Let's see what the Business Daily is holding for us this morning. And this is your splash today. I'll try and lift it up for you quickly, for you to see what it is holding for us. Well, it looks like that particular file is corrupted. but I'll try and show you the hard copy much later in the course of the program. But Taifa Leo is holding this particular splash for you. Masaibu ya Obado, it says. You can follow that story inside the Taifa Leo. And it says, mbali na kesi ya mauaji ya Sharon, gavana wa Migori andamwa na changamoto zingine nyingi. You can follow this story on page 2 of Taifa Leo. And this is how it went yesterday. Also, you can see a related picture there. That is of Melida. This is the mother of Sharon, Melida Auma, in a wipitiary moment there in the courts yesterday when she faced the killers, or the supposed killers, of her daughter. You can follow that story inside Taifa Leo today. I just want to show you also what the Business Daily is holding for us. I'll use the hard copy. You've seen the soft copy is corrupted there, but this is what is a splash today. Bank profits up 19% on cost cuts in rate cap era. This is the story. And it says 8 top lenders reduced their total cost to about 82.5 billion shillings. 8 top commercial banks that account for more than 90% of listed lenders' income shared of million of shillings in cost cuts, even as their total income rose in the first 6 months of the year, helping them shrug off the impact of the rate caps and grow their profits. Latest industry data, NIC, Stanchart, Barclays and cooperative banks reduced their total cost to about 82.5 billion shillings, or by over 700 million shillings, as total income rose 8.7% to more than 151 billion shillings in the half year. You can follow the rest of the details on page 4 of the Business Daily. Also, Githunguri Dairy seeks to wind up uchumi over debt. Kiambu-based milk processor Githunguri Dairy Farmers Cooperative Society has filed, I should say, a petition seeking to wind up uchumi supermarkets in a move that is expected to increase financial pressure on the troubled retail chain. This story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily. Also, how Israel China Farms bribe Kenyan officials. You have all these revelations on the front page of the Business Daily. Chinese and Israeli companies are among international contractors who regularly bribe Kenyan officials to win lucrative multi-billion shillings public infrastructure contracts. It says a new report by global corruption watchdog Transparency International says. You can follow this story on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Let's see what we also have on the front page of the East African. And this is your splash today. Canada pulls out of funding deal for Uganda bombardiers. We are not participating, they say. The credit agency first asked for a 2-week extension to deliver the term sheet. That is what we have on the front page of the East African this week. You can grab a copy for yourself. Also, over 130 dead, dozens missing after ferry capsizes off Mwanza. But of course, we know this particular figure has risen since East Africa went to press. The number stands now slightly over 200. And navigating Lake Victoria has become a matter of trial and error, with ancient navigation routes dating back to the 19th century. You can follow this story on page 4 of the East African this week. Also, there is inside the magazine, and this is what is holding for you at home with the Dalamas of Kenya. Also, watching turtles take to the sea. Serena Beach Resort and Spa opens its hatcheries. You can follow that story also on page 9 of the magazine inside the East African this week. A bit of editorial cartoons. Let's see what is holding for us today. And this is what we have inside the Standard today, according to Gado, that is drawn for us. Of course, you know the saga about Bobby Wine. Yes, still the genie is coming out of a barrel there. That is Bobby Wine. And you can also see the chapfallen face of Museveni there. You know, the latest. And this is what Gado has captured for us inside the Standard. Let's see what we have inside the People Daily. And this is what Stano has drawn for us today. All right, kitu kidogo, of course, with the new rules of all the instant fines, I should say, from NTSA. This is how it will be going, right? But it has to be calculated using the TKK formula. Here is my instant fine. So this is in light of what, of course, the National Transport and Safety Authority is doing with the instant fine. You don't have to go to the courts. But will it turn out to be something like this, where, of course, Toa Kitu Kidogo also will be prominent with the policeman? That is what Stano has captured for you. Let's see what we have also inside the Daily Nation, and this is what Munene has drawn for you, tickling your funny bone. NYS 1 and 2, right? They went with the money. Also, Anglo leasing gold bag. Of course, that particular cow looks like this. The scala all over. Eurobond, Mafia House, KFC, KPC, NCPB, Kenya Ferry Services, KPLC, etc., etc. They went with the cash as well. And the Big Four agenda, right? You can see how the cow is looking, right? Really fat. But the clock is tick-tocking there. How will we fund this particular Big Four agenda? That remains to be the biggest question. And this is what has been aptly captured here by Munene inside the Daily Nation. Lastly, let's see what Victor has done for us inside the Star. Now you see him, now you're not, right? He's all over the place. Now you see him, now you don't, right? He's in Dubai, he's in China, he's in Cuba, right now he's in New York, of course, for the UN, that is the UN National, or the UN General Assembly. That is what we have also captured here, aptly by Victor, inside the Star, that is on page 2. You can make sure you also grab a copy of that as well. So you can actually pick a copy of the Daily Nation and a copy of the Standard as well for these riveting stories. But let's get down to the stories of the day, where of course we're following this particular story as well. And it's all about the clashes where one person died and more than 20 others were injured in intercommunal skirmishes in all Posi-Moru along the border of Nakuru and Narok counties. The allegations that the violence was triggered by a cattle rustling incident.
At the Olenguruoni Sub-County Hospital, medics were on hand to receive the injured from the village's turned battlegrounds. 26 casualties have been brought here in the aftermath of a bloody intercommunal spat along the Nakuru-Narok borders, triggered by the loss of 7 head of cattle last Saturday. Those with grave injuries were referred to Tenwek Hospital in Bomet County.
Most of them had arrow injuries. Some of them had arrows which were within the body. And we have managed to remove all the arrows today. Yes. We have not had any fatalities.
In the now calm battleground, the air was pregnant with tension. Some houses were burning, both communities brandishing their weapons, even as the Narok and Nakuru County Commissioners conducted peace barazas.
Mahindi ilikuwa kwa store karibu 400 bags na kila kitu. Ng'ombe sijui mahali walipeleka sijui.
More officers have been deployed to contain the violence.
We believe the other issues that are fueling all these disputes, we should be able to address them as soon as possible, because this is not the kind of situation that we are allowed to persist for so long.
Still, some of the residents feel the violence has to do, at least in part, with the impending Mau evictions.
Sisi tunaona ni kwamba hii si kasi ya kuibiwa. Hii ni kasi ya Mau Forest, na tunaomba Mau Forest ishughulikiwe na tusaidiwe kwa njia unaofaa.
Mambo na Mau Forest ni kama pia nayo inachangia, kwa sababu wakati ng'ombe zetu zilikuwa malishoni huko msituni, wakale walikuja wakashika hizo ng'ombe 200 wakaenda nazo.
Because we want people to understand that the restoration of the Masai Mau is not a community thing, it's not an individual thing, it's for the benefit of humanity. And we are committed, because I think we've got a responsibility to restore the Mau for posterity and even for current generations.
For now, the area remains under police surveillance.
Now, the Kenya Defense Forces says soldiers in Lamu have killed 10 Al-Shabaab militants in Taksile, north of Pandanguo. 3 KDF officers sustained injuries and were receiving or are receiving medical care. A statement by KDF's Public Affairs and Head, Colonel Paul Njuguna, says a KDF attack on Al-Shabaab militants at around 6:45 a.m. also recovered 7 AK-47 rifles and assorted ammunition. The statement indicates that KDF officers are in pursuit of militants who fled and are now asking locals to share information with security officials as the fleeing militants could be injured and may seek help within the vicinity. The latest attack by Al-Shabaab was witnessed on 29th August, claimed the lives of 5 KDF soldiers and 10 others injured after their vehicle ran over an improvised explosive device along Kiunga and Sankuri Road in Lamu. And Migori Governor Zachary Obado spent the night at the industrial area prison where he will be held until today afternoon, when his bail application will be heard. The governor pleaded not guilty earlier when murder charges against him were read by the judge in Migori County, and around the court his supporters also stood in solidarity and chanted songs against his arrest. Sitting a few meters from the dock also were the late Sharon Zoteno's family and friends.
Urge the court to remand the accused person in custody pending the hearing and determination of the application.
In the meantime, the accused will be remanded at the industrial area prison.
Now, senators are furious with the decision to cut funds meant for counties by 9 billion shillings. According to the senators, the cuts should have targeted development projects at the national government and not at the county level. The senators say they will not pass a new division of revenue bill that factors in the budget cuts. The senators were speaking from Uasin Gishu County, where they insist on retaining the original figures.
Senators say the move was ill-informed and will cripple counties as they take off with their development agenda. Senators who spoke to NTV in Uasin Gishu County, where they are holding their first sitting outside Nairobi in what is dubbed as Senate Mashinani, say the money that was cut as part of austerity measures had already been factored in county budgets.
Yeah, but you see, the money is going to affect the operations of counties, and the Senate is there to defend county governments, and therefore we have an interest.
So it cannot be that when the government expects that there will be a shortfall in national revenues, they want to punish counties, and yet when they exceed the national revenue targets, counties are not benefiting. Our position is that if there's going to be a cut of 9 billion, it needs to come from the national government budget and not from county government budget.
We have counties that are seriously underfunded, countries that cannot be able to undertake development projects because they don't have the funds.
They questioned the rationale used in having the National Assembly address the matter alone, yet the budget cuts also affected counties, a domain that touches on the Senate.
We are going to enact different mechanisms to ensure that 9 billion is reappropriated back to the county to the county governments.
The law does not allow the national government to cut the county disbursement, but they can cut on their development agenda.
The matter now sets the stage for a bruising battle between the Senate and the executive.
Maybe it might be necessary for this country to go to, a referendum so that each house can be given authority. Because the problem we have right now is that as a Senate, the Senate does not have any original jurisdiction on legislation, meaning they cannot work on any legislation and send it to the president to assent directly. It has to go back to the National Assembly. The National Assembly has some bills that they can work on, and they have original jurisdiction.
For the next 1 week, Uasin Gishu County will be home to senators as they devolve their sittings from Nairobi and into the regions, looking towards speaking into the specific matters that touch on the county or region in which they are. Among the issues that is expected to feature predominantly is the issue on budget cuts that was effected last week. Kennedy Mureithi, NTV in Uasin Gishu County.
Right, we have a panelist here to also take us through that particular development of the slashing of the county funds. And this also has been a very contentious debate when it comes to the finance bill that has been enacted right now. It's an act. And I want to introduce to you this morning Dr. Selis Miu, who is the Member of Parliament from Tongaren. Also, we have Dr. Otenda Molo, who is a Member of Parliament from Rarieda. We have Jacob Mido with us this morning as well, who is a former Member of Parliament from Gem. Also, we have the former Senator of Kakamega. This is Boni Khalwale. Dr. Boni Khalwale also is the Deputy Leader of Code Kenya. We're eagerly waiting for Abdulkadir Ahmed actually to join us this morning. The senators are away in Uasin Gishu County, as you saw. So Senator Matangi, Aaron Cheriot, also Isaac, they are away in the counties as well. But we continue the conversation. First of all, just a reaction on that, Dr. Otenda Molo, because I know broadly we'll be discussing a raft of issues in regarding to what happened last week as far as the finance bill is concerned. But the slashing of it, because there was a debate here yesterday that the passing of the finance bill itself, because some of the memorandum really attaches to what is happening with the counties, and the slashing of the fund is one of them. And the senators are insisting, yes, if you're slashing funds like the 9 billion that will be slashed, that really touches on the Senate. And the bill has to come from the National Assembly and go to also the Senate as well for their interrogation and perusal as well before the President assent to it. So the question is, what really happened with the passing of this finance bill and the assenting of the President? Was it an illegality? According to Article 109 there and 110 of the Constitution, if I quote it right, you can actually stand to be corrected.
Well, first, Debarl, let me start by sending condolences. I think closer home, we saw what just happened yesterday in Old Polsi Moro, when one person died and 20 were injured.
Yes.
And from the looks of it, it appears to be one of those things that are continuing. I think the sooner that situation is contained, the better. We've kept seeing a recurrence of it. But also more fundamentally, in our neighboring country, our brother country in Tanzania, we just lost over 224 people who were in that ferry that sank. And I think that's a whole lot of a number that it is unfortunate. We need to prevent such tragedies. Coming back to this issue, and personally, I would not like to discuss it as that dispute that has been introduced, but I'd like to discuss it in a broader context of the entire budget. But let me say two things on it.
Yes.
One is that, yes, the senators are saying that to the extent that the bill slashes monies allocated to the counties, it is a bill that affects counties.
Yes.
And therefore, it's a bill that should go to the Senate.
Yes.
There is some considerable merit on that, because previously the Supreme Court has actually given a judgment that almost allows every legislation, because the Supreme Court posed the question, what is that law that would not affect some county? Because the entire country is divided into counties. And using that reasoning by the Supreme Court, it leads a whole lot of legislation to likely have to go to the Senate, including specifically the Finance Act or bill.
Yes.
But this is a situation where it was already signed into law, so it raises some technical issues. Secondly, but I think the more critical one is Article 218 when it comes to the annual division of revenue bills, which refers to Parliament, not the National Assembly. And therefore, when it comes to the annual division of revenue bill, there's a very strong argument that it requires to go to both houses, because the article refers to Parliament. And whenever the Constitution refers to Parliament, instead of the National Assembly alone or the Senate alone, then it means both. So there would be some considerable merit in that kind of argument. But for me, I think the more fundamental question, and it's a question we discussed here last week,
yes,
it's a question that is ongoing, is not so much the procedural issue around it, but the substantive issue. But when we come back to it, and I know we'll be coming back to what really happened last week, there is the substantive issue, and that's part of what the Senate is raising, that why should you slash substantially monies that affect devolution? And a lot of the monies that are affected are monies that affect the citizens away from national government, whether it's the counties, whether it's some of the devolved funds, and not some of the core issues within national government.
Yes.
But for me, I prosecuted that sufficiently last week. What I would really like to talk about are the procedural improprieties that have been adopted, and to that extent, that might also turn up to be. In last week's debate in Parliament alone, there are at least 12 procedural improprieties, many of which may not be obvious to Kenyans so far, which I think we will need to highlight, because I think the argument against the substantive provision is just one set. But then there's also the procedural improprieties, which even those who may have supported the substantive amendment by the president were iked, or could have been iked, by the improprieties and leading to rejection of the bill.
Right.
But we'll come back to
Of course, yes, we shall interrogate those procedurals or procedural improprieties that you're talking about this morning as far as standing orders are concerned, with last week, of course, proceedings from Parliament. Dr. Eselisimiu, briefly on this, are we facing any...
I think we are in deep trouble.
We're in deep trouble.
I mean, if we just passed the budget the other day, then suddenly we come with a supplementary budget. Does it mean the people who are crafting this budget didn't know what was happening? That they could craft a budget which is then passed by Parliament, including the division of revenue bill for the counties, and then suddenly wake up one day, bang, change everything. That's that to me implies an administration that doesn't know what it's doing. Because if they really knew what they were doing, we could not be getting into this situation. That we just passed the budget the other day and then suddenly we have to redo it again. I've not seen any catastrophe that happened that required that kind of thing. Perhaps the only catastrophe that happened was that we visited the US and China and perhaps took on more loans. That is the catastrophe that might have happened.
All right.
Otherwise, when you realize that the money that's devolved to the counties, a lot of it is actually salaries. Very little is left for development. When you start cutting that again, it's not. It doesn't augur well, because these irregularities that Honorable Otienda Amolo is talking about. In fact, the irregularity to me, I was away, but what amused me most, that an irregular CS was actually in Parliament to marshal the Jubilee troops.
Yes.
He's irregular because the Constitution is very clear. You are nominated by the President, vetted by Parliament, then appointed. He was nominated. He has never been vetted, so he has never been appointed, so he's irregular. So he went to preside over an irregular event in Parliament as he's irregularly appointed. So these irregularities are just following each other. And I think Kenyans should be very, very, very scared. Because if what the ODM leader did with the Wiper leader and the leader of Jubilee, if that's what a one-party dictatorship means, Kenyans should be very scared. they should be very scared.
Thank you.
Especially when you find that Jubilee is now virtually reading from the same scripts as the Communist Party of China, and we are adopting the police uniforms of China. We are in trouble.
All right. They went for benchmarking. So that we can accrue from that as well. Let's hear from Bonnie Khalwale.
You know, some time back, at the beginning of the so-called handshake, when some of us opposed it, maybe we didn't have knowledge, foresight of what is happening now, but now we have benefit of hindsight. You see, the reason why there is House leadership is specifically to create checks and balances.
Yes.
There are 4 people I want to mention today who have failed us.
Yes.
Big time. Namely, Speaker Muturi, Speaker Lusaka, Senator Orengo, and Senator Kipchumba Murkomen. Those 4 people. They should have remembered that this was a bill concerning counties.
Yes.
And under Article 110 of the Constitution of Kenya, which intended that the counties be protected from what happened last week, i.e. an attempt to frustrate its budget, that was deliberately put there to make sure that a decision made, like they did, should also receive approval from the Senate. Why didn't Orengo, with all that English of his in court, why has he not talked about it, that we are waiting for this bill to come to the Senate? Why hasn't Kipchumba Murkomen, and both of them are lawyers? 3, Lusaka, as the Speaker, he should have already made a statement that he was waiting for that bill to come to the House, called the Senate, before his colleague Muturi sent it to the President. In fact, for the 5 years that I worked with Speaker Ekwe Ethro, some of us who are perceived to have had a passion for legislation, he used to invite us for a cup of tea and tell us that there is that business which is now ongoing in the National Assembly. What is your thinking about it? And we would tell him, you should in fact write to the Speaker that we are waiting for this. And sometimes when he used to fail to do that, in our normal debate, we used now to speak to it before it comes, that we are expecting that bill which is ongoing to come to this House for the full legislation cycle to be completed. So yes, it is wrong that this bill didn't go through the Senate, and I'm hoping that some serious people, I've seen members of Parliament have said that they want to go to court in respect of this. I hope one of the grounds will be, Otiendo Mola, and I know you'll take the lead. You know how much we respect you, some of us. That will be that this bill should have gone through the Senate as well.
The Senate as well, right. Of course, we'll get to see if at all there was a violation of the Constitution in this regard. Let's hear from Jacob Medio.
Well, Debarl, it seems that things we seem to be going around in circles in this country. I was in Parliament when they forced on us the security laws. In fact, for the first time in history, I've tried to check parliamentary history. For the first time, the Speaker left Parliament through the back door with a mace. Because they were just doing a wrong thing. And I want to encourage...
did he leave with a mace?
The mace left before him, and they all went through the back door. And that thing became law. So it's just a very illegal thing. It is amazing how impunity is so normal to our political class. You know, first of all, you cannot collect 1.2 trillion and budget for 3 trillion.
Yes.
And then add taxes on Kenyans. What you're doing, even as a leader, even as the president, if he doesn't know he's doing something wrong, then may God help us going forward. Because I was even shocked that the opposition leader agreed with him without debate. You know, one of the biggest misconceptions had going into that debate, Kenyans had a misconception that the president reduced the existing 16% tax. So even for a while I saw politicians talking like now we are going to pay less VAT. The big misconception. And last week we said, as MPs went to parliament, we said here, we tried to clarify that. Now, I do not know how it is normal. In fact, I saw the deputy president yesterday say that they had no options. I've also seen Raila said in Kisumu they had no options. Don't you think we have options? When you go to China and borrow 400 billion shillings and build a rail line that does not terminate in any city, it has no electricity, the locomotives are old locomotives from China, then you bring them here, then you are telling us you have no option. We must take proper austerity measures. And back to the Senate, it is a good time, Debarl, to begin talking about the size of government.
Yes.
Because these counties really, most of these countries are collecting nothing. You know, when we made the constitution, we knew the countries would be economically viable, and the ones which would not be, we created a fund called Equalization Fund.
Yes.
But now all of them are not viable. Look at this issue of Migori and what the governor is found with. What is happening around in the counties is not what we bargained for. That is not what we wanted. We must, all senators, in that debate, please, you are on taxpayers fund or monies, begin to guide this country into a future that we can afford. But you cannot collect 1 trillion and have a budget of 3 trillion. That thing is not making sense. I mean, you don't do it where you live. You don't earn 30,000 shillings and your budget is 100,000. You will go 6 feet under because you will not be able to afford. So we must talk.
We must talk.
Yeah.
And talking we will do. So are we going 6 feet down under? Let's hear from Abdikadir. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. And so I think on the issue of the budget, most of the issues my colleagues raised are germane. But I think it's good to note that budgeting is a function of the National Assembly. It's really important to note that budgeting is a function. The primary role of the National Assembly is budgeting. No taxation without representation. Budgeting is not the core function of the Treasury,
yes,
or the executive. The owner of the budget is the National Assembly. And I think the biggest culprit in this process is the Budget Committee of the National Assembly. See, there are very many misconceptions in our discussions on these issues. For example, that Parliament is too expensive, or parliamentarians earn a lot of money, or that is interesting politically, but in terms of the budget is irrelevant. The entire budget of Parliament, plus the judiciary, plus the commissions, it's a rounding off error in the budget. If you removed all that and made it zero, you would not have a 1-2% impact on the budget. And we usually focus on that. And it's important to focus on our leadership, but in terms of the figures in the budget, that is irrelevant. What is relevant is the executive. That's where majority of our 95% of the resources go to the executive. Now, if you let the executive decide to do whatever they want with that money, when you are hired specifically to be the watchdog for that money, then that's really where the failure comes from. So I would really focus on the budgeting entity, which is the National Assembly. The second is really to focus on the Treasury. We have focused on the judiciary, we have focused on members of Parliament, we have even focused on the presidency or Prime Minister Raila, but we haven't really focused on the Treasury. This is an entity that is probably the most powerful entity in our government, that is shrouded in secrecy. That is really, we need to lift that veil and say who is responsible for these errors, if there were errors. Because the very large issues we are talking about, if we are in problems, where did we what was the route we took to come to those problems? And I think it is important to look at that. Some time back, we proposed substantial reforms on the parastatals that were going to really, because if you look, most of money is lost in corruption, in parastatal through corruption. Not in terms of even their cost, but most of these large projects that are then siphoned out, money is siphoned out from, are housed in, whether it's in the energy sector or in the water sector or in the health sector or in the, most of those large projects or in the transport sector, those are being implemented or mooted or run by parastatals. And we had focused on the governance, we had focused on the role, their focus, but that was shelved aside primarily because of objections from Treasury. Most people don't know this, but primarily because of resistance from Treasury.
So it's not about political will from the executive?
To some extent, political will when we came close to the elections. And because you remember, we have an election cycle.
Yes.
And politicians are sensitive to things that might have bad optics, whether you are maybe setting aside individuals from office ABCD. So there is some role, political role, there's a political role in that not getting implemented. But primarily it was objections and the derailing by the Treasury because of loss of control, because of the fact, you look at it, every parastatal, we have 300 plus of them.
Yes.
Treasury sits on them. Literally every parastatal has a representative from Treasury on the board. Have you ever had somebody in Treasury being held responsible for the losses in any parastatal? No. Every budget of a parastatal is approved by Treasury. Have you ever had Treasury take responsibility for the losses in those? No. And we never focus on them. So I think the key thing is, one, focus on reforms in that sector. Number two, I have no problem if the president or the former prime minister come and say, look, we want to come together and take the country forward in this form.
Yes.
I have no problem with that. I even have no problem with the president saying, look, we need to tighten our belts and focus on, every medicine is bitter. Most medicine is bitter. So if the president says, I want to give you this bitter medicine for the good of the country in the future, I have no problem with that. Only that we have to go through that process all the way from one end to the other.
Thank you.
And you have to focus on the culprits, especially the people in the Treasury.
Of course, yes, and of course we want to really train our focus on that this morning. The parastatal reforms, the president just also appointed new chairman. This is 5 years down the line. Abdikadir used to be the chair of the presidential task force on parastatal reforms, and also the constitution and legislative affairs senior advisor to the president as well. We want to interrogate this. We see why, first of all, you've mentioned the Treasury also is an interested party, why we've had the report not really implemented, and also political expediency from the executive, especially as we are heading towards the general election as well. These are things that we need to talk about in light of course, austerity measures that we seek as a country. Is there interested parties from Treasury that they actually have scuttled the whole process? And we need to know that even the parastatals themselves and state organs, they've been taking a lot of loans that you raise also in the running into billions as well. How do we also account for these particular loans, which sometimes are not really captured by the Auditor General? You just see maybe the ministries, but the parastatals reforms, and how are they mandated? What is the procedures when we have also loans from the state organs as well? But
one little question.
Yes, please.
Honorable Abdi is highly respected. I worked with him.
Yes.
And he played a lead role during the drafting of this new constitution. Kenyans would like to hear it from you, as the former chair of the process, whether you agree with some of us on this panel that this bill that has just been signed into law by the president should have gone through the Senate.
Okay, so we have a debate on the role of the Senate vis-a-vis the role of the National Assembly.
Yes.
In terms of the vertical and the horizontal distribution between the two houses and across the two levels. So I was of the view at the beginning that when it comes to the first distribution of the resources, That was the function of the National Assembly, because that's what it says in the article. Then when this money has gone to the counties, then the Senate now has that role of the distribution across the counties. Now, as you said rightly, I think it was you or Wakili, this went to, and that was my view, this went to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And the Supreme Court took a different view. The Supreme Court took a view like the view of the American Supreme Court when it comes to the functions of the American federal government. And the American federal government has a very limited role. Very, very few roles, like our Senate. Yet now they are in every sector of the national life of the Americans.
Yes.
And what the American Supreme Court said was, used a clause called the Commerce Clause in the American Constitution, and said, look, since the American federal government is in charge or has a role in regulating commerce, and since commerce touches on everything in the life of a person, I mean, you buy something or sell something, it touches on, then the federal government has a role in everything. So taking that argument, the Supreme Court then, as Wakili Mheshimiwa Amolo said, expanded the role of the Senate to say, since everybody lives in a county, each of these activities takes place in a county, it can only be right to say that anything touching on any county then touches on the Senate and therefore is part of the function of the law. So to the extent that the definitions of our Constitution rests with the court, the final arbiter when it comes to what the Constitution means rests with the court, yes indeed, then this is a function of the Senate. So that is, as I told you originally, that my thoughts were different. I thought the vertical and the horizontal were separate. And I gave an opinion to that effect. But the court disagreed with us to say, look, let us bring in. But even if it was not Mheshimiwa, and even if it was just the National Assembly dealing, you must deal properly. You see, you cannot, what will come at the end of the process is the law. And the law is a very serious business. It's a matter of life and death. It's something that somebody will be you're passing taxes. If I fail to pass taxes, my house will be auctioned, my business will be destroyed, A, B, C, D. When your actions have that impact, you really ought to take the process seriously. Because if I'm a Kenyan and I'm feeling my house is going to be destroyed, or my business will be taken away by the action being taken by somebody who is joking around, you know, literally running around like school children, I will be shocked. Even though generally laws, and somebody said you don't want to watch laws and sausages being made because you may lose your appetite. so laws generally are not made in a very nice way. Yes. People negotiate, but you need to do it within certain limits, and there are rules in the house.
Thank you.
So you must take the rules in the house very seriously.
Thank you. Okay, as we're winding up, just to go on a short break, just a station break, I just needed to know from you, and we're taking maybe a general straw poll from all of us, with the assessment that we've really talked about this morning and the Constitution. Do you think there was an illegality in the passing of this particular bill? Right? From your assessment, what would be your considered appraisement of it?
My view is that what happens in Parliament is very important. How it happens is equally important. Parliament passes very serious issues. You don't do joking around there.
Right.
And I get the feeling that our Parliament is getting to the culture of when there is a very important issue to be done, then justifies the means. That cannot be right.
Thank you.
The function of Parliament, if you read the functions of Parliament, you will not see a function that says support your party whatever the cost.
Thank you.
Whatever the cost.
Thank you.
There is no such function.
All right. So I just maybe need a yes or a no.
Yes.
Was there an illegality?
Well, I will not give you a yes or no because I have not really focused on the actual dealings. But what I can tell you is my overall view.
Right.
Yes. You should allow me to explain what happened.
Yes.
I want to ask my colleagues because they were not there.
They were not there, so that we can understand.
I explain.
All right. Then I take a straw poll then.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Okay. When we circle back, then we'll actually delve deeper on what really happened in Parliament, and then of course also we'll see the presidential appointments, especially for the chairman of this parastatal boards. What does it portend for the country in light of this particular task force that he also had constituted being headed by Honorable Abdikadir Mohammed, who was the chair of the Presidential Task Force on Parastatal Reforms, and also the former senior advisor, Constitution and Legislative Affairs in the Office of the President. So when we circle back, we drill deeper on this. Of course, we'll see where there are improprieties as far as the procedure in Parliament is concerned, and also looking at also the standing orders that they're supposed to be following during the proceedings. Don't go away, much more coming up on the other side of a break. Welcome back. You're watching AM Live, People and Politics. And of course, we continue with the conversation. But before we drill deeper on that, we just also want to remind you that the discussion that we'll be holding as well is all about the appointment. And we know the appointment made by President Uhuru Kenyatta to various parastatals on Friday have shown the spotlight on the reforms he initiated when he assumed office in 2013. Had President Uhuru Kenyatta stuck to the timelines he gave for the merger of state agencies, the architecture of the management and service delivery will have been radically different. But almost 5 years down the line, the envisaged merger is still being discussed in futuristic terms, when in fact it will have been completed within 3 months set by President Kenyatta in October 2013, after the Presidential Task Force on Parastatal Reforms submitted its report. When he received the report, the President Kenyatta said the sector, I quote him, will be rationalized to remove overlaps, duplication and redundancies, thereby trimming the current number of state corporations from 262 to 187, as recommended by the task force. The task force recommended merging of several parastatals to save taxpayers money and increase efficiency. The report is yet to be fully implemented. And of course, we shall be looking at this much later in the course of a program. But we want also to doggedly follow what happened last week. Was the passing of the finance bill in Parliament unprocedural in any way? We'll look at the standing orders, but just take a listen to what happened.
The hand count has been taken. We have a total of 215 members present in the House. In that case, the ayes have it, honorable members. That is, yes, this is the record. Yes, yes. Seeing, you can repeat that as many times as you wish to, but I cannot read anything different from what is on the official record. Honourable members, at that point, and this is how it concludes, that the ayes have it. It therefore means, honourable members, the clause. It therefore means, honourable members, the clause which was under consideration. The clause which was under consideration at that point was carried. And therefore, honourable members, we will proceed. We will proceed in committee. We will proceed in committee to the next order.
And I'm holding court this morning with Dr. Otieno Amolo, who is a member of parliament from Rarieda, also a constitutional lawyer. Also, we are holding court this morning with Dr. Eseli Simi, who is a member of parliament from Tongeren. Also, we have with us Dr. Boni Halwale, who is the deputy leader of Ford Kenya and also the former senator of Kakamega. We have with us as well Jacob Midu, who is a former also member of parliament from Gem, and Abdikadir Mohammed, who is the former chair of the Presidential Task Force on Parastatal Reforms and also the senior advisor on the Constitution and Legal Affairs Office of the President. Let's just begin with you, Dr. Otieno, looking at that particular event. Of course, it was a whole afternoon, a whole day of activity, and where we saw the political chicanery and, of course, all this gimmickry that was happening in Parliament. From your own estimation, we want to interrogate, and we would raise the question of if there was any illegality in the passing of this particular bill, right? What will the challenges that it will portend as well? Let's just give Kenyans a good clarity of what really happened, beginning with you.
Thank you. For starters, let me confirm I was there. I was in Parliament throughout the morning session and the afternoon session. And for me, there's a silver lining to what happened in Parliament. It gave Kenyans an opportunity to see in a controlled environment how votes can be manipulated. And so when we insist, some of us, that our votes, especially the presidential vote, was manipulated last year, you can now see how it can be done even in the glare of the cameras. There are at least 12 improprieties. First is on transmission, and some of this we wanted to raise, but the collusion in Parliament is such that you will not be given the opportunity to raise it. I was there throughout. I was not given that opportunity because my own party leader, John Mbadi, and my own whip, Junet Mohammed, went and told the speaker that I should not be allowed to speak.
You should not be allowed to speak.
And they owned it up to me, so it's something I can say freely. One, there's a technical problem with the transmission, and there's a sense in which it could be argued that the amended finance bill as amended by Parliament could have become law automatically. Because we passed it on 30th of August, the President is required to either accept by assent or return it to Parliament within 14 days. Strictly speaking, if you count from 30th, within 14 days must mean before you get to 14 days. 13th of September was the 14th day. So there's a technical sense in which he should have done whatever he wanted to do by 12th of September. Not on 13th, not on the 14th day. So there was a legitimate technical question that needed to be examined. Is it possible that we were technically barred from debating because the President had failed to act either way, and therefore the bill had automatically become law? Now, that point of order, I was denied the opportunity to raise, but it's a very legitimate point. On that also, the Speaker appears to have committed an error. If you look at the Speaker's communication, he says that the bill was passed on 30th of August, then it was duly transmitted to the President. It does not say when. Now, Standing Order number 153 requires that that bill be transmitted within 7 days. The interesting thing is that the President's own memorandum states that he received that bill on 13th and then was able to do his communication on the same day. It raises two very fundamental issues. Is it possible that the National Assembly failed to follow the standing orders by not sending that bill within 7 days as required? Is it possible that they now sent it outside the prescribed 14 days, and what does that mean? But more importantly, is it possible that the President actually received that bill in 1 day, was able to read it, consider it, and transmit it back to Parliament the same day? I mean, it would just be fantastic. That's only one. Two is in terms of summoning of the National Assembly for a special session. We were all summoned because we needed to come and deal with this extraordinary thing. The unique thing, and we were here on Tuesday, you remember when I clarified that the order paper suggested that we were not going to consider it on that Tuesday. You summon Parliament back for a special sitting for 2 days, but strangely, on the very first day, you don't bring the business for which you summoned Parliament. On the very first day, we only dealt with the Speaker's communication, and then we went back to other pending ordinary bills that had been pending, I don't know, the health amendment laws, I don't know, all those other things. So it's as if it is clear that the first day was not a special sitting. It was an ordinary sitting. It raises fundamental issues. But the third issue is on the Speaker's communication. What the Speaker said, which is not true, but he has maintained in that communication, is that in his communication, if the President, if a bill is sent to the President and he sends it back, you require 2/3 of members to override it, which is true. But it's not 233, it's 232. It's 232 also because one of the seats, as we speak and as we sat there, had been declared vacant for Ugenya, you know. So that also reduces the numbers. But he then went on to say that unless you ascertain that you have that number, you cannot take that vote. That cannot be true. What is true is that you must ascertain the ordinary quorum of Parliament in its ordinary way. Now, if Parliament, in its ordinary quorum, even if they don't get to 233, agree with the President, then they pass it by a simple majority of those who are there. But if they insist on overriding, then you must allow the division and the voting. But you must then now count whether those who are rejecting the President memorandum get to the threshold of 232. It is not that unless they are 232, you don't take the vote, because that would then mean the President makes law. There must be a process by which even the President's views must be endorsed by Parliament, even by simple majority. That is the only way Article 94(5) can have effect, that no one can make law in this country other than Parliament. The fourth issue is the order of business. Now, strangely, we had passed a budget, we passed the estimates. That those estimates went with the finance bill. Now the finance bill was rejected, which must mean we needed to consider the president's rejection, and if we adopt it, then we look at the estimate, the supplementary estimate. If we don't, we may not need to, because the supplementary estimate now came with the amendment to the finance bill. And therefore, what Honorable Chris Wanjara suggested, which is true, is that we should have looked at the proposed amendments by the president on the finance bill before we then come to the estimates that go with it. But what happened in Parliament is that it was inverted. In the morning, we were now forced to look at the supplementary estimate. In a way, it was presupposing the debate. And so, and as some of them said, that once you pass those supplementary estimates, then you have indirectly endorsed the president's reservations, because they're based on that. Now, that is unprocedural. The other five, the fifth thing is that, and this, we had this discussion here with Jaco. You remember Jaco suggesting that there's one way of beating the 2/3, okay, by introducing some small amendment to the president's own amendment, proposals. That is true, except the speaker ruled, and in that I think he was right, that you must then look at that amendment. If it's consistent with the president's proposal, then you pass it by simple majority. But if it is inconsistent, then you need a super majority, 232. Now, what Kenyans don't know is that I introduced an amendment on that day. And I did it in writing and signed it and sent it to the clerk. And my amendment, to meet kind of halfway, was to say, okay, now that the president has introduced the 8% to be effective immediately, why don't we do a further proposal to accept it but postpone it by a year? So I introduced an amendment to postpone it by a year.
Yes.
That amendment was never allowed to come to the floor. The speaker decided that it was inadmissible in his office. The speaker cannot decide that. That is a decision that must be made. First, he is allowed to determine whether it's consistent or not consistent with the president's memorandum. But having done so, then he must say that if it is consistent, you need a simple majority. If it is not consistent, you need a super majority. He did not allow that. He killed it in the back room. But to go further is now, let's examine what happened. We were allowed, and we took clause 18, which is the one that deals with 8% first. TJ Kajwang introduced that, let's get to that first, and it was accepted. And the speaker, the temporary speaker at that time, asked, and there was an overwhelming nay, and I think everyone saw that. For some reason, she said, the ayes have it. Now, isn't that a mockery? Why call for that vote if it does not matter? I saw her trying to explain later that she said that because in any case, you need the super majority to overturn that. But that can't be true. What you would do is you say the nays have it. But now, you nays who have it, we need to establish your numbers. How many are you? Because if the ayes had it, then what was the need to count? Even that count of 215, you didn't need to count. If the majority, therefore, agree with the president, you don't need to establish the numbers. You just need to establish that there's quorum and the majority agree with the president, because it's a simple majority. They went to count because even she knew that the nays had it. Now, this is where the pandemonium broke. In counting, it is the clerks who are counting.
Yes.
Those of us who are in the house, first of all, at that point, and those who have been in parliament longer know this, that once that moment gets to that moment, then you close the doors. This is an unprocedural thing where they opened the doors, allowed Duale, Mbadi, Junet, and others to walk out. And members had to physically, some members had to physically go and close that door. Because parliamentary orderlies were not doing what they ought to do. Okay? And then the count, when they returned the verdict of 215, that is where the pandemonium broke. Because the members who were there were sure there were more than 215. So the members said, we will not work with that because we are more than that. Then what did she say next? She says, okay, members insert your cards so that the cards can electronically count. The irony of it is, even before we insert, those of us who had inserted, we were then told, now remove so that you insert afresh, because otherwise it will interfere with the numbers. Before we could do that, the screens were showing that the total number of members was 352, more than the total number of parliamentarians. Yes. And it was immediately clear to us that the electronic voting was pre-rigged. That even if you inserted now, and because it is secret, there was no way you were going to tell how many people voted yes or no. If before you start counting, it shows more than the members of parliament. That's when the members say no. Now even that electronic voting, we cannot take it. How do you take it? When the gadget itself shows that it is defective or manipulated. Now the members went to the floor of the house, not because they wanted to create mayhem, but they decided that, okay, let us do it the manual way. We will queue and we will be counted. That is when the members went down there. The temporary speaker rejected that. Now that members then became very frustrated.
Did she reject or you guys rejected?
No,
Because some people are really not wanting
No.
going
members,
for the
if you look at the cameras, you will see that members filed to the floor to be counted. They were queuing.
She's the one who called for the Mlolongo.
No. She asked, do you want Mlolongo?
Yes.
Yes, and the members said yes. Because the members started queuing before they were asked. She did not ask members to do Mlolongo. And if she did, then why was there no count? Now, the problem is this. The problem then arose when the electronic gadgets cannot work. The manual counting seems manipulated. Then the speaker comes back to take charge. What does the speaker say? The speaker says he was sitting in the speaker's office.
Yes.
And he has seen the Hansard. And then he reads the Hansard and commits two fundamental mistakes. One, he says he has read the Hansard, and the Hansard shows that those who are in favor of the president memorandum were more, when clearly it was not, and it was obvious. Then he says that at that point, a division was called. Usually a division is when somebody does not agree and then they stand, you need at least 30 people, then the bell is rung and all.
Yes.
No one called for division. In that case, when those who rejected the president memorandum were many, no one called for division. Yet the Hansard says there was a division. Then he says the bell rang. The bell did not even ring.
Yeah, there was no tolling of a bell.
None at all. So the electronics have failed. The Hansard is misleading. The speaker comes to reiterate what is misleading. The frustration of members increased. That's when they demanded that the speaker must listen to them. Now, the speaker listened to 10 members who were chosen at random, and some of us had our hands up forever. We would not get it, but that doesn't matter. All the 10 voted and spoke against the president's memorandum. Does that not tell you something? But then that's the point when the speaker said, now we'll have a second vote under Standing Order number 71, when the vote is unclear or something. Usually, you don't need a second vote, because whether it's a question of quorum or not, it is up to the person presiding to establish it before you call for the vote. But that doesn't matter. Even the 411s that came said that the speaker had called for a second vote. You must ask yourself to date, why was that second vote not taken? At what point did the speaker change his mind that we are no longer taking a second vote when he had directed that we would take a second vote? So you are in a situation where you have a rigged, chaotic situation. And what resulted is that once they got away with that clause 18, which was never voted for, aye, at any time, there was never an aye vote, there was never a count in terms of members for or against. The speaker just pronounced that it is passed. The rest of them, you had Duale and a few members shouting aye, the rest, the majority shouting nay, and the speaker saying the ayes have it, consistently against the vote. Now what is more fundamental, and this is where I'll stop, is that the president memorandum did not just address the finance bill. The president took the opportunity to introduce clauses in his memorandum that were not even contained in the finance bill, which is completely unconstitutional.
So there was sneaking.
He even sneaked things like, anti-adulteration levy, things like redefining the winnings under the Income Tax Act, things that were beyond the scope of that act. And in so doing then, the president essentially took over the lawmaking function of parliament. And through the speaker and all that happened in parliament, we voluntarily ceded that to him. Now, what must always be known is the papers and the media must not keep saying that parliament endorsed the president memorandum, because it is not true. I was in parliament and the numbers were there.
All right.
Let us just say that the parliamentary operations were sabotaged to make sure it passes.
Well established. Then now we can actually now hear from also Eseli. Eseli,
yeah, I was not in parliament that day.
Deliberately?
Unfortunately, no. I traveled out.
Yeah, you're out of the country.
I was out of the country. Remember, we communicated.
Yes.
But whatever that chaotic scene reminds me of the Security Laws Amendment Act that came through parliament and was rammed through. I think what we are seeing is that the administration is not averse to fraud, has never been averse to fraud. In fact, it thrives in fraud, such that they have no respect for parliament and they are willing to even commit frauds in parliament. And this is dangerous for us, because this same administration has been either cynically interpreting the constitution or just countermanding it outright. So the issue of rule of law for them is neither here nor there, so long as they win. And to me, this is a very big warning to the rest of the country. Come 2022, Kenyans should bury Jubilee once and for all. Because we continue with this lot.
All right.
We continue with this lot, we'll get nowhere.
Okay.
And given what transpired in parliament, we've always had that feeling that the speaker always has pre-selected people to speak on certain matters.
Excuse me.
And he will not allow anybody else with what he might think might be a contrary opinion to speak. And in fact, this has gone on from the 11th parliament to the 12th parliament. In fact, if you remember, in the 11th parliament, at one time I was virtually nothing heard, because I would never get a chance whatever. Because, like, take this. If you call parliament back on Tuesday and you bring the health laws amendment bill to be debated, when you know very well that the chair of the health committee and its members are out of the country, and you bring it to be debated, who is supposed to lead this when the chair is out of the country, several members of the health committee are out of the country? I think there is something terribly wrong with parliament, and that blame lies squarely at Muturi's desk.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, just briefly, because I think we've gotten a very comprehensive scenario given by Otiende. I want us just to also be wrapping up on it, but let's hear from Boni Khalwale and Jakoyo and then Abdi Kadir to establish what then should be the outcome of this. Have we, as well as say, crossed the Rubicon, or there is some remedial measures that we can come up with as far as this act is concerned right now? Can we also challenge it constitutionally if it was unconstitutional?
You know, if you insist that the three of us who are not in parliament be brief, and you have allowed Amolo to prosecute...
He has established.
Can I, sir?
Yes, sure.
You might end up leaving the impression that what Amolo has said is true. Allowing me to use harsh words against my colleague here. Amolo, all you are doing is you are trying to use a lot of legalese to cover up for the failure by members of parliament to have discharged their duty, on that day and while the matters were still in the committee stage. One, you have talked about the president bringing this matter within 14 days. On 13th, if the matter had come to the House beyond midnight of 13th, then the president would have broken law. It was still within 14 days, so long as the 14th day was not yet over. So the president was right. Two, the issue of what you did in the morning, i.e., when Parliament, without raising a complaint, you passed the expenditure. Having passed the expenditure, surely in the afternoon, the expenditure you had passed in the afternoon you are merely arriving to come and speak to the revenue raising measures which would enable what you had passed in the morning to be funded. What stopped members of parliament from standing on many points of order and refusing that you could not pass expenditure before a decision is made on the presidential memorandum? 3, you are hiding on the fact that there were more nays than ayes. It is true, there were more nays than ayes. But that is not the critical issue. The critical issue is what Muturi did, right? Is what the temporary deputy speaker did, right? The answer for both is yes. Yes, to the extent that unless you have changed standing orders, the years that my two colleagues were there and I, we know that it is in order for the speaker to establish that on a matter that requires a decision to turn on 2/3, that division is not going to be done in vain. It is being done when you have the 2/3 in the House or more. So when Speaker Muturi established that you had less than 2/3 in the House, when he said what he did, he was right. In fact, what members of parliament you should have done, instead of singing Mapado Mapambano, that meaningless behavior in the House, you should have spent the entire day ensuring that you have not less than 232 members in the House, to always know that you will have an opportunity to overturn the decision of the president.
On the matter of technicality, the 352 that we had on the screen as well, what will you have to say that it was very providential on that particular day that you had a 352 reading on the screen, which is not, of course, the forum or the quorum in the House, which is meant to be 359.
My brother,
no, I want just to hear from you.
Amolo,
yes,
and Dr. Seli, they have already answered that. There is a lot of manipulation of the electronic process in Parliament.
Manipulation.
And I've been victim to the same, I know. But I want to speak to the actual physical presence of members. And you know what was required? When the Deputy Speaker said, and this Constitution allows her, when she said that the ayes have it, they didn't have to raise any halabaloo. All they needed to do was to rise in their places and say one word: division. The moment they say division, it didn't matter that the Deputy Speaker had said the nays, the ayes have it. Then the division would establish that you have got 232 members plus. Finally, the Otiende has spoken to the issue of the proposals by the president, that they were beyond what was in the Finance Bill Amendment Act 2018. Whether he's right or not, but this is exactly why members of parliament, instead of singing in the House, they should, like gentlemen, with a lot of decorum, they should have debated presidential proposal by proposal, tax line by tax line. It is during that debate that then, at the end of Molo, you would say, proposal number 5 is beyond what is contained in the Finance Amendment Bill. You did not do that. So members of parliament, you are playing to the gallery. It was conmanship.
Just a minute. He has never been in the National Assembly under Justin Muturi.
Yes. It is difficult.
He has never
That's a question I wanted to ask.
I live in there, but I was disappointed.
Thank you.
And just in conclusion, we have had more emotive circumstances of doing debate in that assembly. Amolo, before you came there, the 3 of us were there during the post-election violence. We did not have a speaker. We had only one person in authority, the clerk. And the clerk was ailing. He was sick. He could hardly speak. Kibaki was seated there. Raila was seated there. It was very stormy, but because people went there for minds to meet, we were able to hold our country together. Hii mchezo yenye mnaona wajumbe wanafanya kwa bunge kuimba mambo ya pambano, wafanye kazi.
The thing is, remember that time, Bindiri managed to control the house, okay, because he knew what standing orders were, and the members also respected that. This is a situation where parliament administration is wrong. The electronics are malfunctioning. The speaker is rigging the speakers. I mean, he's choosing the speakers in not a very...
The sergeant at arms also...
The sergeant at arms is not really closing the door.
All right, let us hear from Jacob.
Talking from experience, first of all, let me say, Utiende is right and Boni is right. Both of them. They are not even contradicting each other. Except that vote was taken before Parliament was called. When you see ODM having a parliamentary group meeting, then Jubilee gets a parliamentary group meeting, they have the numbers. Why do they have to fight? The Raila meeting was to whip members to go and support Uhuru's proposal.
Yes.
The other one was, so why are they treating Kenyans with that nonsense?
The drama.
The drama. It's because Kenyans of good sense like Utiende Amolo went there to correct what seems to be a kangaroo parliament. Quote. Parliament. You know, Debarl, I was in Bomas of Kenya the day we passed the first draft. It was my first term in Parliament. Then after we made the vote, I saw Karua grab Moody and Woody and say, let's go. That's how people ended up in Kilifi. That is what happened in Parliament. I slept at KICC with James Orengo and a friend of mine called Diko Gola. We counted, we found the excessive votes in Tharaka Nithi, Naivasha, wherever. The same Karua walked so fast the following day to Kivuitu's office, and in the evening, Kibaki was declared president. I watched that happen. In 2013, I was at Bomas. I saw the movement, and then I was there during security laws. Then I've been there in many, many occasions under Speaker Justin Muturi. All I can ask, because now I have opportunity, that please, Speaker, don't let Kenyan Parliament be destroyed under your watch. Because it's a house of procedures and rules. What is happening, about 3 weeks ago at the bar, we spoke about the same members Utiende has spoken about the sugar thing. About the sugar issue. And I said here that Parliament has nearly 50 special branch officers. And how come none of them saw MPs taking 10,000? And how come no MP has not been arrested? What Utiende and Boni have said, those are just correct. But I think the debate needs to be moved a bit higher. We need a superior debate. Because we saw MPs quarreling about 3,000 shillings, 10,000 shillings. None has. Why is corruption in Parliament a normal one?
All right.
And let me just say this. Let me ask Utiende Amolo, because I have understood the procedures he has read. To get a team of lawyers, inside or outside Parliament, or even if the lawyers don't want to do it, get to Kia Umtata. This is a wrong thing on Kenyans. And especially when opposition and government agrees, the only person in opposition I have seen articulate this issue like a good Kenyan is Musalia Mudavadi. And I want to thank him for that. He has spoken as somebody who wants good for the public. These other people, what they are doing, they are committing a crime on Kenyans. You can't.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can't. What we are doing.
Thank you.
I want to say one last thing only.
Briefly.
To Honorable Utiende Amolo. You people in ODM has been the opposition in this country for the longest. It is a good time to rethink your association with this government. Otherwise, we will, in 10 months or so, we will never have much of a country to speak of.
Thank you. Abdi Kadir.
Thanks. I think on the technical issues first.
Yes.
And Wakili is a senior lawyer now, a legislator, and he was on the floor. So I will not really dwell much on that. Just to point out that the 14 days start running when the president receives the memorandum. not when, for the president's side. From the president's side, the time starts running when you receive. So the president starts acting the moment he receives.
So it doesn't count if it's really out of the country, the days are still rolling?
No, it doesn't count. You see, the president is an office.
Yes.
So the moment it arrives at the presidency, when it is received formally as a document, that is when the time starts running. Number two, but that doesn't mean that that's when they start working on it. You see, Parliament is a public entity. The parliamentary records are public, and there's quite a bit of discussion between the presidency and the legislature on these things. So the moment you pass, I would probably have a copy of what you passed, and I'll be working on I mean, whoever is in the presidency will be working on the response, so that it is possible for the president to receive it today and respond today. Because even while it was still on the other side, I was working on it, or it was receiving attention. Finally, there are certain procedures in the AG's office. So the moment the warrant, so the whatever is passed in the house, you see the vellum copy and stuff are done by the AG's office. So there's a bit of a procedure between the house and the AG before it goes to the presidency. So that takes a bit of time also. So that's why probably in terms of the timings, that's what Otiende is saying. On the issue of the division, I agree with what Bonnie said. I think the key thing is this, Debarl. First of all, Parliament has not clothed itself with glory, whichever side. Whether those who are supporting this or those who are opposing this. Parliament has, as Bonnie said, Parliament has faced far much more critical points in the history of our country than this. I mean, times when there was bloodshed going on in the streets and the House was debating. And as I told you, it was, remember that day when we were voting for a speaker in the 10th Parliament, the first sitting of the 10th Parliament. The House was being managed by Clerk Ndiriri, who was ailing. He was actually in a very critical health situation. Yet, you could hear people speak, give their points, and people had to vote once, twice, 3 times, and we were there up to midnight, but everybody had his day. People who were not happy, there were very, very strained moments. But at the end of the day, everybody knew who won and who lost. Now remember what Speaker Marende did. What was the first question that went to him? Whether people like my friend Jacoyo were going to take an oath that had the president's name in it. He was just elected in a very heated debate by ODM, who were brought in by buses, by the way, and who had forced their members to show their vote. It's even though it was supposed to be a secret ballot. That's how heated it was. And what did Marende say? That having read the rules and the constitution, they have to swear with that oath. That was the decision of the speaker. That is what is required of people in those positions. Now on the other side, people like my friend Wakili Omolo, Parliament is a very powerful institution. Its toolbox has a lot of tools. You can use any of those tools to hold the executive to account. Let me give you an example. When Justice Regera was reappointed by the Kibaki administration as head of the Anti-Corruption Authority, contrary to the views of Parliament and the board that oversaw the Anti-Corruption Authority, the board came to Parliament and said, we think this is not lawful. We think that since we are going to be asking people about their integrity, it cannot be that ours is questioned. We want your help. And Parliament, the committee sat, the legal committee, and I was a member of the committee, and we said, what can we do? And we said, of course, Parliament has rules. And Parliament has powers. And we went to the House and we cancelled the entire budget of that commission. It was then and said, no, since we have the power of the purse, for you to get resources to spend, you have to talk to us. And we negotiated with the executive and said, you have to go through the process again if you want us to go forward. Without drama, without demonstration, without anything. And the executive knew that had to happen. And the person we were negotiating with then was Prime Minister Raila and Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Kenyatta. With the committee, discussing, look, and the speaker, because they were dealing with the speaker and the committee was dealing with the speaker. So Parliament has a lot of powers to correct this stuff. Now, there's nothing wrong with being whipped by your party. And there's nothing wrong with Prime Minister Odinga agreeing with President Kibaki on a particular issue concerning tax. What we need to do then is, once you have agreed, execute it properly, procedurally, with decorum. Since you have the numbers, why do you have to fight? Why really do you have to? Why do you have to scream? Why do you have to, do all those shenanigans and then go and boast about it on national TV to say I was doing tricks? You're passing laws. You're passing laws. Laws are very important stuff.
Thank you. So, Abdikadir, because now we've established all that, the aim of this discussion was to establish whether there was a procedural event that took place on that particular day. So what does it portend? And the question that we raised earlier regarding the Senate, that they needed to have also some input in this, because also the 9 billion shillings, the 91 billion shillings, is really touching, is it the 91 or 9 billion?
Can I just...
9 billion, yeah. So are we also facing a spawning ground where, people will take legal actions against this?
First of all, legal action is part of the process. So really, but can I speak to two items? Number one is, what is the role of the executive when it comes to constitutional funds? So, for example, the fund for the counties is established at the constitution. It says a minimum of 15%. When you have passed that, can the executive then come back and grab some of that back and say, look, we are going to remove part of this from the... For one of the funds, I am sure of the answer. The equalization fund, there is no such power. It is unconstitutional to say I'm going to reduce the amount that has gone to the equalization fund. The Treasury, the executive has no such power, and it's therefore illegal. I'm very clear on my mind on that. On the counties, the issue that comes in is the issue of what is ordinary revenue that has been approved and audited. And this is again a failure of Parliament, or of the National Assembly, not Parliament, the National Assembly. Ask yourself, I think these two gentlemen were both in the Accounts Committee. And when Bonnie was the chair, I believe, he really pushed very hard to have the audit and approvals come to as close to current as possible. Yes. The last audited and approved accounts are 2013-14. We are in 2019. Mm-hmm. We're in 2019. So legally speaking, constitutionally speaking, when the administration says we have given the budget of 30% to the counties, what they are talking about is 2013-14 audited approved accounts plus 15% of that plus extras. If you really give 15% of the current budget, which the national executive is utilizing, then you cannot go below 15%. And therefore, it will be unconstitutional to remove monies from the county's allocation. But because of this shenanigans of not approving, and that's why I'm very unhappy with the Treasury,
yes,
the Government Audit Office, and the budget, the committees of Parliament. In this case, the Accounts Committee. Why should we not have audited and approved accounts for last year, or the year before, or the year before that? Why should we have the last one when I was in Parliament 6 years ago, 7 years ago? And since then, the 11th Parliament has come and gone. So for the entire term of the 11th Parliament, we have no audited or approved accounts. So what is the role of Parliament then, when that is their primary function, is the power of the purse? You remember, this whole business came from no taxation without representation. So I think we need to look at that and say, Treasury cannot play fast and loose with the rules of the Constitution, while on the other hand, we are enforcing bylaws of the county government of the building code so drastically that we are crashing people's houses. I mean, you really need to go together on the same. If you are going to be very strict on the building laws of the county of Nairobi, the Constitution comes way, way, way above that in terms of how you need to implement. You cannot be very strict with this one and you are fast and loose on the other side. Mm-hmm. We have to be really very careful how we do those things.
Thank you.
Finally, one myth I would want to debunk,
yes,
is that the Constitution has made the government expensive. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you removed all the state offices, it will be a rounding of error in the matter of the one parastatal loses in one financial year far much more than Parliament's cost in that year. And that is where we need to be focusing, because we get focused on monies that are political, whether it is CDF or the salaries of members of Parliament, which are important to focus on. But you're focusing on the crumbs on the floor, while the real stuff, the money that Kenyans have paid or borrowed, is largely being wasted away on things that are really being,
Yeah, and I think that was the basis also of the discussion that we wanted to discuss today.
Yeah.
I will request you, Abdikadir, if next Tuesday, just as we could actually broach the subject of the parastatal reforms and why the president is going full steam ahead to appoint other chairman, when that particular report that you came, very comprehensive report, and seeing how we can collapse and merge these particular parastatals can actually help the country to save a lot, as opposed to what crumbs you're really talking about from maybe from the CDF and all that jazz. But I know there's a lot that we can do. But just as we're giving our closing remarks, I want to hear from, lastly, from Otene Molo, also from Eseli and Bone Khalwale and Jakoyo. Where do we stand with this particular finance bill, that Finance Act right now? Have we crossed the Rubicon?
Yes. My suggestion, next Tuesday, as we discuss that, and I agree, let's actually also do a further discussion in terms of the overall cost. This myth that this constitution is expensive, that there are some offices that are creating the... Because if we come to the numbers, and I agree with Abdikadir, you'll be surprised. In fact, even in these budget cuts, the areas that should have been cut are not cut at all. Where they have cut have been the areas that they should not have cut, but we can have that discussion. Yes, the finance bill. First, let's debunk two quick things. It is not ODM that called a parliamentary group meeting. It was actually NASA. No, I'm telling you. You were not there. Let me explain. Let me explain.
Because NASA...
No, let me explain.
Alazi and Junet are not spokespeople for NASA.
It is okay. It is okay.
That is not a NASA meeting. Just because you managed to rope in Chris Wamalwa and Catherine Wambilianga from Vote Kenya doesn't make it a NASA meeting.
That is also fine.
That was not a NASA
But let
meeting.
me show you the invite. It was a NASA PG. That is what the invite was.
Sent the invite?
And that is what the statement read.
Who sent
No,
the
it is
invite?
okay. Because how you manage it is a detail. But the point I want to make is this.
You cannot
The meeting that was called was a NASA PG.
No.
That is why even Daniel Manz was there. That's why Dr. Chris Wamalwa was there.
Yes.
And the statement was issued on behalf of NASA. Part of the problem is that immediately it came to Parliament, the party leader of NASA, John Mbadi, opposed. His deputy, Honorable Mbiu, supported. So they took diametrically opposed position. The same with Junet and Dr. Chris Wamalwa. So it followed that the NASA members could not have been united. Two is that I think either Dr. Halole either did not listen, or if he listened, he didn't understand. He was saying what ought to happen in Parliament, which I agree with. But that's not the issue, Dr. Halole. The issue is what actually happened.
Thank you. Thank you.
But lastly, is that I think we should agree. The day we allowed political convenience to supersede the law, the truth, and the common good is the day we lose ourselves as a nation state.
Okay. So what is the future of this, just briefly, or is it unconstitutional?
In my view,
yeah, briefly,
it was unprocedural, it is unconstitutional, but I will not take the invite by my brother Jakoyo to go to court. I have gone to court on too many. Let others who equally feel aggrieved also go to court.
On pro bono basis, because no one will actually... Let's hear also Dr. Eseli.
I would like to debunk the idea that that was a NASA decision. It was not a NASA decision. It was an ODM decision. It was an ODM decision supported by the people that ODM is holding on to in the various parties to try and destabilize them. Finally, apart from debunking the myth that the constitution is expensive, we also need to debunk the myth that the wage bill is the cause of the increased taxes. It is the high debts repayment rate that is the cause of the increased taxes.
Thank you.
It's not the wage bill. Yet, you look at something like the managed equipment service, where the Ministry of Health now has a bigger budget than it had before devolution.
Thank you.
Yet, health is the most devolved.
We shall...
This same money is factored in the Ministry of Health budget, for paying for managed equipment service. The same money is deducted from counties for paying for the managed equipment service. That's double payment. Where is this money going?
Where is the money going? We shall interrogate that next week. Bwana Khalwale, briefly.
Kenyans should not lose. It is not all lost on the 16% fuel levy and the other taxes that were raised. Because unfortunately for the president, unfortunately for the common mwananchi, they left out the Senate. It is unconstitutional for you to touch on sharing of revenue and revenue allocation amongst counties without involving the Senate. So that cut of the allocation to the Senate in itself negates the provisions of this constitution, and therefore we look forward to Omutata and other Kenyans of goodwill to go to court so as to set into motion the process of annulling this poor decision.
Briefly.
You know, between Eseli and Otiende, it would be interesting to know how NASA is. Which NASA is NASA? I said here before that NASA was as dead as the last elections.
Maybe we have NASA kueleweka, NASA kutangatanga as well.
Maybe even Jubilee is as dead. But let me just tell you, the issue you are saying we will delve on next week, I am of the opposite opinion. And I can understand where Abdikadir is coming from. And there is no way you can have counties which are not collecting taxes and they have no ability of collecting taxes in the near future. You have given them 5%, receive monies that are collected from people from Kiambu or Kakamega. That is just the wrong basis of this. And I would really want to be part of that debate next week.
Thank you. Yeah. Abdikadir.
And we'll have that debate, and I think it's a good debate to have. In any case, very soon we're going to have it because we'll go into the whole business of boundaries and stuff. But can I say that I am actually for the idea of the handshake? It's really a good thing. It's not a bad thing for the two leading political groupings to come together for the sake of the country. That's a good thing. Number two, I believe the two gentlemen have their hearts in the right place. That requires very clear explanation of what it's about and a very clear implementation process.
All right.
And I think we need to take the country to the right place through the right path.
Thank you.
You really cannot take me to the right place through the wrong path. And those need to be discussed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really want to appreciate you this morning for that very interesting discussion. And as we're winding up, also Alois Kiagai, she's saying, it is not a house anymore, it's a market. Thank you very much for your valued company. Living with Us is up next.